Hi, I'm Robin Armitage. I teach graphic communication with Brian, and Brian's now going to take you through an exercise that we usually do on Bridging Week.
Hello, my name's Brian Lee, and together with Robin Armitage, we'll be teaching you on the graphic communication course. Usually, when we're doing bridging, we have a little sort of example of the history of digital media, and we talk about the development of logos and sort of the history of their development, things like that. We also talk a little bit about the development of digital image manipulation, which is obviously a very large part of what happens in the work of graphic designers these days. One of the earliest images that was used in mainstream advertising is a picture a little bit like this one we've got on screen at the moment, which is where we have a apple core edited into a bottle. In the actual case, it was a bottle of cider, and it was meant to sort of advertise how crisp and fresh the product was. And the actual coding to do this, because this is pre Photoshop by about 8 years, this actual coding of this thing took about 3 weeks to get it right, because you have to specify, for instance, where the edges of images are and how to treat images when they sort of blend from one to the other. So all of these things would have been coded, and you would run that code onto the images, and then the computer would basically produce the image, and you would only know if you'd made a mistake when you got to the end. These days with Photoshop, we can do this job in about 5 minutes. So we're going to do it right now. And normally, if you were in bridging with us, we would be, as soon as we'd taken you through the process, we'd let you get onto the Apple Macs and have a go at doing it. Anyway, we're going to go through the process right now. So we're going to create this image, and we've got two other images up here in the dock, which are basically the Apple core and the bottle. And these are stock images, and as you can see, most stock images, they come on a plain colored background like this, and this is to make it easier for you to edit them out. It's easy to sort of cut round this thing. You can do it with the dot to dot tool, and when we're doing our workshop lessons, we have a whole series where we talk about all of these selection tools here and how to modify your selections up here, which is one of the menu items. Right, we'll get to work on producing this bottle. Now, the first thing we need to do is to create a space between the front and the back end of the bottle. But first of all, we need to get the bottle on a layer on its own. So over here on our layers palette, we're just going to reproduce that layer. And the thing about Photoshop is you can get as many reproductions of your image as you want for free. We're then going to use this tool here, which is the one that is why these things appear on a plain colored background, which is the Magic Wand tool, because what this allows you to do is to select the background, that common colored layer, and basically it runs around the image until it sees an edge, and then it stops. Now then, we can instruct this to clear it. So under edit we go clear, and you won't actually see any difference because there's another image identical to it behind. But over here on our layers palette, you can see if we turn off the lower layer, you can now see that this bottle is floating free on its own layer. We need to get rid of our selection, so we go to select and deselect, and then we need to reproduce this bottle again. So we're just going to make another copy of it. So over here in our layers palette, I dragged it down onto this thing that looks like a little sheet of paper next to the bin, and that reproduces your image. We're now going to cut this bottle in half so that we can get a space between for our apple to go in the middle. I'm going to use this selection tool, which is the marquee selection tool over here. And I'm just going to specify which bit of the bottle I'm interested in. So I'm just drawing a marquee selection over that area there. And on this top layer, I'm going to edit clear that. So edit and clear, and that gets rid of the front end of the bottle, as you can see on this layer here. Now, rather than reselect a layer, I'm just going to invert my selection. So select inverse. And on the layer underneath, I'm going to clear the other end of the bottle. So this is edit clear again, and it's just a quick way of working. Deselect, so we get rid of that up there. And now moving our move tool, which is the one that you use most often, this one here, you can see that we've actually got one piece of our bottle on one layer and another piece of our bottle on a separate layer. Okay, now then, if we just turn on our background temporarily and turn off the others, you'll see that we've got this bottle on the green background. What I'd actually like this entire background is to be this solid green now, because I've split my bottle into two pieces. So I'm just going to go up to select and select all, and then sample the color. So basically get my sampling tool, and that shows up in the front of the selection there, and edit fill. So under edit, we're just going to fill that background layer. Need to be on the correct layer. Edit fill with our foreground color at 100%, and it just eliminates our image. Okay, deselect, and now we're going to turn on our other pieces of the bottle again, and we're just going to see that we can move them around still. Okay, we're now going to go to our apple image, which is up here, and in this case I'm just going to rotate it. So under image I can rotate the entire image, and it's just to sort of get it into the correct position first of all. So I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to collect my magic wand tool again, just to select the common colored background. So I'm selecting that, and what I actually want this time is the opposite of that. At the moment I've selected all the white, and what I actually want is the opposite or inverse of that, and that will give me the apple as a selection. I can now get my move tool, drag it, and holding the mouse button down, we go up to our image, holding the mouse button down still, and then we drop the image of the apple on top of our bottle images there. So you can see over here on our layers palette we have the bottle half at the top, then our apple core, and then our other section of the bottle. What I actually want is the apple in front. So just holding the mouse button down, I drag it to the top of the stack, and you can now see that we've got that roughly in position. So there's our sort of like assembled image. Now obviously there's some problems, the edges don't meet up, so we need to first of all look at how we can get those pieces to match. And once something's on a layer, it's governed under edit. So if we go to edit, you can see we've got free transform tools here, but one of the most useful ones, particularly if you're trying to match edges, is the distort tool. And this draws a bounding box. Sorry, that's the wrong layer. Deselect. I need my apple layer. Edit, transform, and distort. And what you can see here is it draws a bounding box around our object, which means that we can pull it around to get it to match exactly where we want it to be. And what we need to do is get the edges of the apple core to match with the edges of the bottle. And as you're pulling them around, what you'll see is if you adjust one edge, the other one will slightly move. So it's just a case of manipulating that until you're happy with it. Once you've got it roughly in position and you're happy with the edges lining up, if you double click in that box, that confirms the work that you're doing. Now then, what we're going to have a look at doing is combining these two pieces of the bottle onto the same layer, because if we have a look here, we've got our apple core on one layer, we've got the front end of the bottle on one layer, and we've got the back end of the bottle on another layer there. So what we're going to do is just to hold the shift key down and make these two layers active, and then out at the end of our palette we've got another menu item, and it is basically saying merge those layers that we've selected. So those two now become one bottle layer. So we've got our background, we've got our bottle, and we've got our apple. What we need to do now is to blend this bottle. If we look back at our reference, you'll see that there's a soft edge and how these sort of like images blend into each other. And the way that we create that is down here on the foot of the layers palette. We've got this little thing that looks like a circle in a square. You click onto that. Sorry, I need that on the other layer. I'm just going to take that off and basically go onto the layer above. This is where I need my editing layer. So I'm just going to put this layer mask on here, and masking works with black up front and a paintbrush tool, and it's just a way of erasing. So I need some sort of soft paintbrush tool, so I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. That's it. And obviously the best thing to do is to work with the maximum sort of size paintbrush that you can. And with black up front, I'm going to just coast along the edge of that image, and you can see what it does is it blends one image into the other. Okay, And we can work on the other side. Now the thing about this is it's called non-destructive editing, and the good thing about this is not the same as erasing your image, because if you erase it you have to go back to your history palette in order to replace the image. With this non-destructive editing you can put your white up front, so we just use these little pair of arrows next to our color selector, and if we put white up front we can bring our image back again, so it's endlessly sort of manipulatable. You can keep going backwards and forwards until you see, just going to flick those arrows around again until you see exactly what you want. Okay, now then, if we're roughly happy with that and we sort of think that's reasonable, we're just going to sort of try and combine all these layers together. So the top layer is our apple and the layer underneath is our bottle, and what I want to do is to make them a single image. So I just hold the shift key down, click onto both of them, and out at the edge of our menu we have the merge layers, and that's the ones that I've activated there. So they now become one object, so you can see that's the work that we've done to that layer. And if you take a look at our reference image, you'll notice this has got a nice soft glow around it, which is sort of just a way of, it's actually a physical effect. And FX down here is for your effects palette, and one of the effects is outer glow. There we are, so we just click onto that. And normally what we do is we set all of these things for normal, because we want to understand how the paint's being applied. And one of the color ways of sort of picking the correct color, or a color that looks like it belongs in your image, is to go to the image itself and pick your lightest color that's present. And then once we're happy with that, we click OK, and we then push our sliders along just to sort of see the effect take place. There it is, you can see it, and that's quite a hard edged version of it. If we pull this back, it'll soften that effect up a little bit, and you can see we get that sort of glow that we were after. Click OK, and you could flatten the whole image right now and that'd be your job done. So obviously we've done that in about 4 or 5 minutes, and so that's what we can do these days. Now when you're working in Photoshop, what you'll be doing is finding your own way of doing it. I tend to use the mouse a lot and very few keyboard commands, whereas some people like to use a lot of keyboard commands. It's just whichever way you get used to working with it, and that's the way that you'll be working on your skills in lessons.